We're back! Shred Nation, it finally happened. There is a longboard on Shred Show, and it is so big that it barely fits in the studio. The room might explode, and I'm not gonna be able to throw this around like I usually do. For those of you who have been asking for a longboard for a very long time, I really hope that you're as excited as I am. And for everyone else, there are 3 reasons why it was very important to put this board on Shred Show. And there's 3 reasons why longboards with this type of an outline are important in general. I wanna do this part outside. Reason number 1 is the past. Between about 1955 to around 1970, nearly every surfer on Earth was riding a 9/6 longboard, representing about 15 years of the historical surfing experience happening on longboards. If you never feel the experience of riding a 9/6 longboard, you're missing out on a massive piece of what surfing is. Reason number 2 is the present. If you don't have a longboard, you miss out on about 15% of surfable days because you don't have anything fun to ride in 1-foot glassy peelers. And lastly is the future, because if you get in the habit of enjoying longboarding now, you may be adding about 15 years of surfing experience to your life, because in your later years, your knees and your lower back might not get along with a 6.0 shortboard. And let's get one thing straight, we all hate the guy who hangs out the back and steals way too many waves. But that's not longboarding's fault. That's a problem with that guy's surfing etiquette. I mean, longboarding is fun. You've literally just got to stand there and do nothing but watch the water go by, and that's all that it takes to enjoy yourself. So if you're Matt Parker and you own Album surfboards and you are mostly known for your shortboards and for your hybrid fishes, what would make you design a board like this?
No quiver is really complete if you don't have a longboard. There's obviously people that shortboard more and do more of that, which I'd probably fall into that category, but I think there's certain spots, Sano or Old Man's, or when I'm taking my kids to Doheny, there's just certain spots that longboard is the only board that's going to work there.
Now before we get into the technical aspects of this board's design, I want to point out that when I designed this studio, I did it with the intent of featuring surfboards that were white. Nowadays I seem to have this odd habit where I pick out surfboards that I think look really cool, and then I get here into this studio and realize, you know what, sometimes a surfboard just looks a little bit better when it's not in this infinitely black void. If you want to see this Coda as well as many others from Album surfboards in all sorts of color combinations, get on Instagram and search the hashtag #AlbumCoda. You'll also see pics of this model being ridden, like this one of Sean Zappo nose riding. Now the idea behind riding a board like this is riding way up on the nose, like the photo that you just saw. So predominantly when you're on a shape like this, your feet are generally occupying like this portion of the board. And the only time that your feet are back here is when you weight this down to bottom turn right after you drop into a wave. The point of a board like this is riding and gliding and trimming in the pocket of the wave like you see in this photo. So in the same way that you would stall for a barrel to slow down your shortboard so that you can stay slow back in the pocket of the wave to let the lip go over your head, you want to slow down and stall for the pocket of the wave on a longboard so that you can be in the sweet spot power source of the wave and spend a lot of time up here just gliding and trimming. That's why it should make you tingle with anticipation to get into the rails and the bottom contours of this board. The first thing that you notice on the rails of a board like this is that there is no hard edge on the bottom of the rail. It's just rounded coming up from the bottom of the board to where it meets the apex of the rail. That's very different than a shortboard, because a shortboard would have a hard edge in about, the back third of the board roughly. And the reason for that would be that you're trying to get water to shear off the tail of a shortboard quickly. But these rails are totally rounded coming off the bottom of the board throughout the entire board. So if you're surfing this board, water does not want to just shear off of the back of this board like on a shortboard. Water wants to wrap around the rail from the bottom and hold on to the board. One way to think about this is that when you're riding a longboard with rails like this, the water back here in the pocket is holding onto the board and tugging it backwards at the same time that the force of the wave is trying to propel the board forwards. That means that the design of a rail like this will help you ride the board up here and stay back in the pocket of the wave longer than all this float in volume would lead you to believe. Now go look at any longboard like this one designed with influence from the 1960s and you will very likely see something similar happening with the bottom concaves. Single concave becoming flat, flat becoming rolled, rolled, more roll, roll all the way through, still roll. This is where things get very fascinating because back in the trailing 3/4 of the board from like here all the way back, you see the opposite of what you see in a shortboard. A shortboard would be digging into the board and creating a concave, but this board is rounded from rail to rail, creating a contour so that you can rock this all over the place like this. So in the opposite way that a shortboard would use a hard edge on the rail to get water to shear off quickly, and in the opposite way that a shortboard would use a concave to give the board lift off the water and forward propulsion, a longboard will use that rounded bottom contour and that rounded under edge of the rail to give the board the opposite of lift off the water and instead give the board suction down on the water. Why would you want that? Well, if you're predominantly going to ride a board like this so far forward, you want to counteract that teeter-totter effect that your weight forward could cause that could allow your forward weight to make the nose purl. Having these rounded bottom contours allows the back of the board to be sucked down on the face of the water instead. Now, as far as the single concave up in the nose, that further counteracts the teeter-totter effect because it gives you lift up in the nose, bringing the board up as you're riding on it, at the same time that the trailing bottom contours and rounded rail edges are sucking the tail down, all working together to keep your body weight on top of the water. So the equation looks about like this. Shortboards have concaves and hard edges to give them lift off the water's surface and forward propulsion, whereas longboards have rounded bottom contours and soft edges to give them suction down onto the water's surface and prohibit them from having that forward propulsion. Let's talk about fins. When it comes to the style of single fin that you'd surf in this board, rule number one is surf the fin that feels most fun for you while you're riding. There's a lot of different shapes and styles of single fin. For example, this one kind of looks like an oversized thruster fin, but the one I'm going to focus on for this board is the rudder. For starters, the depth of your fin in inches should always correspond roughly to the length of your board in feet when you're riding a longboard. And this fin penetrates 10 inches into the water, matching up nicely with the measurement of 9.6 on that longboard. Next, this fin is very long from the beginning to the end of it, so there's a long distance that water has to travel across throughout the entirety of the fin. That creates more drag in the water than a fin like this, where water has to travel a shorter distance from beginning to end of the fin as it moves through the water throughout the entire depth of the fin. This is not a long distance for water to travel across. That makes this tiller fin move through the water a little bit faster than this rudder fin, and this fin will help double down on the round rails and the round bottom contour effect that we just talked about. Lastly, you'll notice that this rudder fin does not have a really swept back tip. It's very upright, and this part of the fin does not trail in the water very far behind this part of the fin, and that lets the fin pivot very quickly and immediately for immediate direction changes, for example, when you drop into a wave and bottom turn. The tiller fin is more swept back, with this part of the fin being much further behind this part of the fin, and that makes this fin pivot more slowly in the water and makes it better for more drawn out turns. So if you had to choose between one fin or the other, I think this fin would be the starting point. Another thought on why you might find this fin pairs well with this board is that all of the surface area in this part of the fin, how wide it is from here to here, creates a ton of resistance and prevents the board from sliding down the face of the wave like that. That's really useful because when you're just learning how to nose ride, you do not want to feel any drift in the tail. And this type of fin prevents the board from doing much other than stably holding a line moving forward, unless of course you get in a position to get your feet all the way back and you really press down on it to pivot it. To begin wrapping up, everything about this board's design is created to let water hug and hold and grasp parts of the board to keep the board at pace with the power source of a wave and in the pocket on a wave probably between about 1 to 3, maybe 4 feet. I think riding this board would be fun for any surfer of any skill level, especially people who want to feel what surfing was like in the past. And I also think it would be fun for any surfer who wants to experiment with a new source for joy when the waves are small. Shred Nation, if you're around Southern California and want to get your hands on an album Coda or a Midnight or a Polyphonic or a Sub or any of the boards that Album makes, be sure to visit the Boardroom show this Saturday and Sunday, May 14th and 15th at Del Mar Fairgrounds. I'll be there walking the showroom floor, as will Matt Parker from Album and many more surfboard shapers that you have heard of. I will see you there, or I will see you soon on Shred Show. For someone who's never ridden a longboard before, like, how do you describe that sensation, and why is it fun, and what is it that you're looking for on the board as you're riding the wave and you're moving around? Like, what is the sensation of finding that trim spot in your mind for someone who's never done it?
I think with the shortboard or hybrid or those kinds of boards, you tend to be looking more down the line, and you're more your approach is where I'm traveling to and what section of the wave I can bank off of or turn to get to a certain spot. And a longboard to me feels like I want to just be in sync with the motion of how that wave is moving, and I'm just trying to find that speed that aligns with that right little proper section of the wave. Mm-hmm. And so that longboard just lets me sit there, and so it's almost like that weightless feeling, whereas on a shortboard sometimes you gotta pump to get to a certain spot. With the longboard, when you're in trim, it's like feels the most efficient part of the wave, where the wave is really the sweet spot and you're just traveling at the same speed with that wave.